Tonight on Bridge City News, the throne speech was delivered in Edmonton today, including new legislation introduced dealing with protesters who set up blockades. Premier Jason Kenney and NDP leader Rachel Notley both played the blame game when it comes to Teck Resources pulling out of the Frontier Oil Sands project. And we hear a powerful story about a Lethbridge business owner who explains why she had to give up on an iconic restaurant in our city.
Your nation, your province, your southern Alberta. From the heart of Lethbridge, it's Bridge City News with Hal Robbins.
Good evening. Thanks so much for joining us. Alberta politicians returned to the legislature today for the throne speech and with a promise of new legislation targeting protesters who set up blockades. Premier Jason Kenney said he was going to table a bill calling for stiffer penalties for anyone who riots on or who seeks to impair critical economic infrastructure, including railways. Kenney has been critical of protesters who have set up blockades on rail lines in support of the hereditary chiefs of the Wet'suwet'en First Nation. Many of the protesters are opposing the natural gas pipeline project on their land in BC. Protesters have set up a blockade on a popular commuter rail line near Hamilton, Ontario, halting passenger train service. About a dozen people have gathered near the tracks.
We currently continue to monitor the situation, and at this point in time, the protesters have been served with an injunction by CN Rail, and we are encouraging them to abide by that injunction and to leave the area peacefully. Right now, we're monitoring the situation. I can't forecast the timeline. What's important here is that we'll continue to maintain a peaceful environment.
Another blockade has been set up on a rail line in Sherbrooke, Quebec, about 150 kilometers east of Montreal.
Protect those who are being faced with injustice.
Close to 300 supporters of the Wet'suwet'en hereditary chiefs who oppose a pipeline across their traditional territories gathered at the BC legislature last night. They were chanting and protesting a court injunction prohibiting similar actions. Victoria police officers were monitoring the supporters who at one point linked arms and blocked the progress of a police van arriving at the legislature. The injunction gives police authority to arrest people. The Canadian Federation of Agriculture says the sector is feeling the effects of the blockades and is near the tipping point. CFA President Mary Robinson says farmers and other producers want decisive action from Ottawa to prevent such rail disruptions in the future.
Every person here with me, as well as their communities, are being severely and harshly impacted by the rail blockades. We have nothing to do with this dispute. The widespread collateral damage of these protests is grinding our entire industry to a halt and is taking a massive toll on farmers across the country.
Alberta Premier Jason Kenney says the decision by Teck Resources to not proceed with the Frontier Mining project is the direct result of federal dithering on the approval process and recent rail line blockades by protesters. Opposition NDP leader Rachel Notley says Kenney is to blame for fostering a partisan, polarizing debate on the environment.
Let me be clear. There is absolutely no doubt that this decision was taken in large part because of regulatory uncertainty and endless delays created by the national government, as well as the general atmosphere of lawlessness that we have seen take hold parts of our country and much of our economic infrastructure in the past 3 weeks.
As long as Canada is fighting itself, is fighting internally, and as long as we pit sustainable, responsible economic development against meaningful strategies to combat climate change, all of us across this country will be left behind. Now, when we were in government, we were making significant progress on this issue, working together with key industry leaders. But even before his election, Jason Kenney has staked his political career on tearing all that down, sowing division, and undermining progress on combating climate change.
The Liberal government has introduced legislation aimed at making it easier for ill Canadians to get medical help to end their lives. Health Minister Patty Hydew said that health practitioners have been pressing for more permissive rules and have expertise in identifying people who are not dying but who are suffering.
One of the things we heard very clearly from the practitioners that provided feedback at the roundtables and through a variety of different means was that they had become very adept at determining when someone was reasonably foreseeable in terms of an imminent death. And we're able to have those conversations with individuals. I mean, we have a great deal of respect for the profession and especially the practitioners who've been providing this service over the last 4 years. And the law is constructed in a way that actually gives some autonomy to physicians so that they can determine if someone's death is imminent or if someone's death is not.
Alex Schadenberg is the Executive Director of Euthanasia Prevention Coalition. Schadenberg says this new legislation by Ottawa is not something Canadians should be celebrating.
Well, the legislation on euthanasia is a bit of a smokescreen. So what they've done is they've said that they're going to prevent people with mental illness from having euthanasia, but in fact, the law doesn't actually prevent people from mental illness from having euthanasia. So it's a bit of a smokescreen. The second thing they're doing is they're waiving this 10-day waiting period for people who are terminally ill. But you got to understand, the will to live for people fluctuates, and studies have proven that people change their minds. And so this denies the person an ability to change their mind, because what happens now is they could ask for euthanasia in the morning, and in the evening they could die by lethal injection.
Foreign Affairs Minister François-Philippe Champagne is advising Canadians to check before you go when it comes to the coronavirus and traveling overseas. The advice comes before March break when many Canadians love to travel.
The best advice I can give to Canadians watching at home is make sure you check before you go. That's the best advice I can give. We've seen new places where the coronavirus has expanded in South Korea. We saw in Italy today, not only the north of Italy, but we saw Sicily and Tuscany. We've seen what's happening in Iran. So the best advice I can give, obviously we will update our travel advice based on science, based on data. I've been in touch with foreign ministers in different countries. We are coordinating our response like we've done for the first time. But for those watching at home today, I would say before you book, just make sure you check. That would be the best advice I can give now, because this thing is a very dynamic situation.
Canadians and their families who were flown home from Wuhan, China 2 weeks ago have been released from quarantine. They spent that time at CFB Trenton, Ontario, being monitored for any symptoms of the coronavirus. A 7th case of the virus was diagnosed in BC, bringing the total number of cases in Canada to 11. So far, we have none in Alberta. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo spoke out against China and Iran for their response of the outbreak of the coronavirus. Pompeo accused the two governments of censorship and of trying to cover up the severity of the spread of the deadly illness.
We also want to applaud the brave reporters who are covering the spread of coronavirus from Wuhan itself. Expelling our journalists exposes once again the government's issue that led to SARS and now the coronavirus, namely censorship. It can have deadly consequences. Had China permitted its own and foreign journalists and medical personnel to speak and investigate freely, Chinese officials and other nations would have been far better prepared to address the challenge. Similarly, the United States is deeply concerned by information indicating the Iranian regime may have suppressed vital details about the outbreak in that country. As of yesterday afternoon, Iran was second only to China in coronavirus deaths.
U.S. President Donald Trump is asking Congress for $2.5 billion to protect Americans and to fight the coronavirus in countries around the world. A U.S. health official says the virus, which causes COVID-19 illness, has infected more than 79,000 people globally and caused more than 2,600 deaths. He says it is nearing a pandemic level.
They have, the authorities, WHO and others, don't like to use the word pandemic, but by the classical definition, we're really teetering very, very close to that, because there are a number of countries outside of China that do have considerable number of cases, and there is community spread in those cases. So if you're not calling it a pandemic now, I think we're almost on the brink of it being considered by many people as a pandemic.
China is spending around $14 billion U.S. on combating the coronavirus. I asked our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari what the money is going towards specifically.
In China, they're probably spending that money on research, on quarantining, on really getting the resources to stop this, because it sounds as though it's spreading faster than they're able to contain this virus. It's spreading not only throughout the country, but in the region and into other continents, including the Middle East, into Europe. Of course, here in the United States, we've had some cases. So, it's not looking good. It looks like this virus is moving much faster than those who seek to stop it.
Lisa will have more on how fast the coronavirus is spreading around the world. That's coming up after business news. Behçet's disease. It's probably not a term that most people have heard of. Tamara Angel, the former owner of the Burger Baron, is speaking out about her new diagnosis with the disease. BCN's Micah Quinn has the story of her struggle and how she hopes to raise awareness about Behçet's.
If you spotted Tamara Angel on the street, you probably wouldn't think that she has a disease called Behçet's.
Yeah, I got diagnosed in 2015. First onset of symptoms was fatigue, unexplained rashes, migraines, dizziness, canker sores in the mouth and ulcers in the stomach. And after doing a 3-week stint in the hospital, they were able to come up with Behçet's disease, which is super rare.
Angel is the former owner of the Burger Baron, and she explains why she had to shut down the restaurant.
The only reason that I closed was because I was getting sicker, and I just didn't want my business to suffer with me not being there full time and taking care of it the way it should be taken care of.
There is a growing list of medication that Angel takes to combat Behçet's disease.
We take everything from painkillers to immunosuppressive drugs like Humira. I take colchicine, that's for the ulcers, migraine medications, cancer drugs.
Angel says that it's hard to live a normal life now that she has Behçet's, but she knows she has people around her to help.
My husband, my family, my friends are an amazing support system. When they know I'm sick, they make sure they're here to help no matter what.
For Bridge City News, I'm Micah Quinn.
Police in the Raymond and McGrath area are asking for our help in identifying a suspect in connection with a robbery that occurred yesterday afternoon. RCMP say around 2:40 p.m. they received a call about a bank being robbed in McGrath. The suspect jumped over the counter, confronted employees, obtained an undisclosed amount of cash, and took off on foot. The suspect is described as a male Caucasian, around 6 feet tall, wearing a tan-colored jacket, tan work boots, orange work gloves, a black mask, and glasses. If you can help police, call Crime Stoppers right away at 1-800-222-8477. A Calgary mother has been charged with aggravated assault a couple of years after her 11-month-old daughter was brought to hospital. The girl was admitted to the Alberta Children's Hospital with a broken arm in March of 2018. Police investigators discovered that the girl's twin brother, who lived in the same home, was found with a fractured ankle and multiple skull fractures. Police say the woman, who cannot be identified to protect the identities of the kids, is not facing charges related to the boys' injuries at this point. IHOP is giving away flapjacks today in honor of their National Pancake Day. The restaurant chain is giving customers a free short stack of buttermilk pancakes at participating locations until 7 o'clock tonight. BCN's Loris Alexander stopped by the IHOP in Lethbridge to explain that it's all for a good cause.
National Pancake Day is the perfect excuse to load up on carbs for a good cause.
We're celebrating our National Pancake Day today, February 25th, and it runs from 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. And we're supporting our Children's Miracle Network, especially our own Children's Hospital in Alberta, here from Calgary.
Voluntary donations will benefit Children's Miracle Network hospitals in the 7th annual celebration in Canada. We spoke with patrons at IHOP and what tickles their fancy about pancakes.
I like pancakes with butter and syrup.
It looks like, let's see, the butter pecan is my favorite. Yeah.
Is that your short stack?
Yeah. It's free.
So I'm here with Rowan from IHOP, who's going to teach me how to flip some pancakes. Rowan, how long have you been working here for?
Almost 4 years. This May will be 4 years.
And so this would probably make you an expert a lot more than me, right?
Probably.
Okay, let's dive right in. Okay. So what am I doing?
You're going to want to just loosen them so you don't dig into it. So if you just loosen it, it makes it easier to flip it.
Okay.
Yeah. So you just do side to side and then you can flip it.
And
More than $425,000 has been raised since the inception of IHOP National Pancake Day in 2014. Just a tasty way to give back. For Bridge City News, I'm Loris Alexander.
The Boys and Girls Club of Lethbridge and District held a youth conference on Lethbridge College campuses. I Stand Against Media Manipulation Youth Conference was a day of digital, media, and civic literacy workshops. There were opportunities aimed at lessening the impact of misinformation, polarization, and disengagement.
So I Stand Against, this year we were doing an event based on media manipulation is what our theme was for this year. So just talking to young people about fake news, learning how to figure out algorithms, kind of weed out things that they know to be true and not to be true on the internet, being aware of those kind of warning signs about knowing that your stuff is factual. Yeah, and just giving them some information about privacy and stuff that maybe they didn't know about, especially with their social media and stuff like that.
We had lots of sunshine, but slightly cooler today. Fortunately, the mercury will be climbing. Complete weather details are on deck. We had sun mixed with cloud and slightly cooler today. Still not bad weather for the third week of February. Jeanette Roche is here now with a look at the weather forecast. Jeanette, even warmer temperatures are on the horizon.
Well, yeah, warmer temperatures are certainly on the horizon, but not until after tomorrow. Let's take a look at what's happening tonight. We're going to see a low of 0 degrees with wind gusts 50 and gusting to 70 km after midnight. Into tomorrow, we're going to see a mix of sun and cloud, a high of 6 degrees, but we are going to see a 30% chance of flurries in the afternoon. So we just have to get through that white stuff, and then we are back into sunshine and plus temperatures, actually double-digit temperatures. 11 degrees is the high expected for Thursday, and look what's happening on Friday. We could even see it peak into the teens. 13-degree high expected for Friday. Saturday's high 9, 5 for Sunday, and 8 degrees for Monday. So not a bad looking week ahead of us. Lots of sunshine and a bit of scattered clouds there for Sunday and Monday. So the almanac averages for this time of year, highs and lows. Average high being 3 degrees. We're certainly reaching temperatures above that. -2 would be the low temperatures. The high temperature on this day was back in 1992. It was 19 degrees, and the chilliest day on record was -33. That was back in 1994. The sun rose this morning at 7:23 a.m. and it set just after 6 o'clock, right at 6:05 p.m. By the way, the cold spot today in Canada, -38 over in Nunavik. Glad that we're not there. Let's take a look at what's happening on the west coast. Vancouver's going to see a 30% chance of showers tomorrow with a high of 9 degrees, high of 10 over in Victoria. Lots of sunshine expected in Edmonton with a high of 3 degrees and a lovely 5 degrees expected tomorrow over in Calgary. Now, Saskatoon tomorrow could see a 40% chance of flurries with a high of -4. A 30% chance of flurries is expected in Regina with a high of -5, and a mix of sun and cloud expected in Winnipeg with a high of -11. Now, over in this region, we are seeing special weather statements and winter storm warnings in effect for Toronto, Ottawa, Montreal, and into the rest of Quebec as well. They could be seeing snowfall starting this evening, 2 to 10 centimeters mixed with freezing rain, so just be wary of that. Fredericton's high 5 degrees tomorrow, Halifax 8 degrees, Charlottetown a lovely 0, and St. John's 2 degrees. We are seeing fog patches in the whole area here, and it's going to be dissipating tomorrow, but St. John's will not see any fog. They will see snow instead. There you go. That is your forecast. Back to you, Hal.
North American stock markets continue to tumble for the second straight day on worries the spreading new coronavirus will threaten global economic growth. At 2 p.m. our time today, the Toronto market was down around 165 points. In New York, the Dow Jones Industrial Average was down around 325 points. Yesterday, it plunged more than 1,000 points, wiping out gains for the year. We will have the final market numbers coming up shortly. Saskatchewan Premier Scott Moe says Ottawa has no right to impose a carbon tax in some provinces and not on others. Moe was responding to the 4-1 ruling by the Alberta Court of Appeal, which said the federal tax is unconstitutional. The Saskatchewan Court of Appeal and a court in Ontario both sided with the federal government in similar challenges of the tax. The Supreme Court of Canada is to hear arguments on the tax next month, but Moe is calling on Ottawa to remove the tax until after the ruling. Some good news for a couple of major banks. Both Scotiabank and BMO Financial Group reported a first quarter profit this year. Scotiabank says its number went up 3.5%, while BMO had a profit of $1.59 billion, which is an increase of $1.51 billion from a year earlier. Revenue also increased to nearly $6.75 billion from $6.52 billion a year ago. BMO says a lot of the profit is attributed to the expansion of its footprint south of the border, while Scotiabank says the success it's had is attributed to the bank's diversified businesses. Now, here's a look at today's markets. The novel coronavirus has been negatively affecting the markets once again. The TSX was down 385 points to 17,177. The Dow was down 879 points to 27,081. The S&P 500 was also down 98 points to 3128. And the Nasdaq was down close to 256 points to 99.65. Oil was down $1.33 to 50.10 per barrel. Natural gas was up a cent to $1.84. Gold was down 53 cents to $16.3461 an ounce, and silver was down 7 cents on the day to $17.94 an ounce. Wheat is at $224 per metric ton. Barley is also at $224. Canola is at $461, and corn is at $259 per metric ton. Live cattle were down $1.98 to $117.78. Feeder cattle were down $3.05 to $137.23. And lean hogs were up 5 cents to $65.88. The Canadian dollar was down slightly on the day to 75.27 US. Recapping one of our top stories this hour, Alberta politicians returned to the legislature today for the throne speech and with a promise of new legislation targeting protesters who set up blockades. Premier Jason Kenney said he was going to table a bill calling for stiffer penalties for anyone who riots on or who seeks to impair critical economic infrastructure, including railways. China is spending just over $14 billion to try and curb the coronavirus. Our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari has details for you next. And if you'd like to watch our interviews online, check us out on bridgecitynews.ca or our YouTube channel. Now, here's a look at events happening in and around your community.
Here's your Bridge City News community calendar. Men, young and old alike, are invited to come join the Lethbridge Christian Men's Choir. Practices are held every Thursday from 7:30 to 9 p.m. at Trinity Reformed Church. The choir practices are in preparation for spring concerts as well as occasional performances at the hospital and seniors' homes. For more information, call 403-328-7985. The Kinsman Club of Lethbridge invites you to their 6th annual Mardi Gras Charity Gala on Saturday, March 14th at the Sandman Signature Lethbridge Lodge. The evening begins at 5 p.m. where you can enjoy the ambiance of the French Quarter, which will also feature a 5-course Cajun meal, games and entertainment, a silent auction, dance, and much more. Tickets are $80 and can be purchased at eventbrite.ca. Proceeds to go towards the Ready, Set, Go Back to School fair. For event details, visit the Kinsman Club of Lethbridge's Facebook page. And that's your Bridge City News community calendar.
China has just allocated over $14 billion for curbing the coronavirus outbreak. To talk more about it is our foreign affairs expert Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Lisa, over $14 billion, what is the money going towards?
Well, you know, that number is probably not even accurate when you think about how much this has cost the global economy, including right here in the United States. We've watching the stock market tank as a result of coronavirus and then a few other factors, of course. But this is a global reaction to the coronavirus. In China, they're probably spending that money on research, on quarantining, on really getting the resources to stop this, because it sounds as though it's spreading faster than they're able to contain this virus. It's spreading not only throughout the country, but in the region and into other continents, including the Middle East, into Europe. Of course, here in the United States, we've had some cases. So, you know, it's not looking good. It looks like this virus is moving much faster than those who seek to stop it. And again, with the fact that it is affecting the global economy the way that it is, maybe it's showing us how reliant we are on China, how reliant we are on goods that come from China. With regards to this tariff war between the United States and China, it's always been that the United States was obviously the one who had the upper hand, that had the leverage, that had obviously the larger economy, that the Chinese relied on in order to play in the world economy. But now, you're looking at the most mundane of objects like tuna fish, like pharmaceutical supplies, like toys are coming off of Amazon that are all coming from China. And because of that, this is a moment where we stop and say, hey, wait a minute, we need them too. This is what leads people, of course, to come up with conspiracy theories as to how and why this virus is spreading at the speed that it is spreading, and why we've allowed it to create this uncertainty with regards to the world economy.
And the coronavirus infections are surging in Italy and South Korea, Lisa. There's been a lockdown at a Venice, Italy carnival, and the disease has even killed 8 people in Iran.
Yes. So where there are airplanes and cruise ships and people traveling country to country, this virus is spreading. In Italy, as you said, the carnival in Venice, this is something that people look forward to, that they travel to. It's affecting tourism all over the world. They're trying to stop it as best as possible without really creating a crisis further than it's already created in the economy. Of course, tourism being a main economy in many of these nations that you listed, and throughout different places in South Korea, in museums and in theaters and other places, they've shut themselves down because of the spread of this virus, and of course in Iran. There are, outside of China, the number 2 nation suffering from cases of coronavirus is in Iran. And I was reading about how this strain that has been found in Iran, there is no direct link to the one that is found in China. Again, speaking to a family member who is a physician on Friday, he said that there are many types of coronavirus. We just don't hear about them because of the incidents are so few usually. Right now, because there's this rise in the number of cases, we're hearing more and more about it. But that the flu, for example, has killed more people in the United States this year alone than the total number of people killed by coronavirus. So again, it's being reported because of the fact that they're not able to stop it, because of the fact that it's been spreading so quickly, and because of the fact that it is transcontinental, as you said, spreading from nation to nation as people are traveling and bringing the virus with them.
U.S. President Donald Trump says he's prepared to sign a peace deal with the Taliban. Lisa, there are certain things we need to know about the emerging peace deal between the Taliban and Washington.
Yes. So, Hal, you and I have talked about this maybe every single week, about how there are so many instances in which the Taliban are still terrorizing the people of Afghanistan, that they cannot be trusted as a partner on the ground there in Afghanistan. But the White House believes that they are the only viable solution for a future in Afghanistan, for a group that understands the people, that has clout, that has the base to be a leader in Afghanistan. But we've always had the policy of not negotiating with terrorists. So what do we do with this situation? Well, Donald Trump is giving the Taliban a chance. This is not a ceasefire, but it's almost a trial period where we are looking to see and observing to see if the Taliban can behave themselves up until the 29th, which is the end of this week, to go forward with a deal that, again, will incentivize good behavior moving forward. Obviously, the optics on this are not good. They have proven themselves to be a terror organization and have not been able to keep to the many ceasefires that they have put into place over the last few years. But again, the goal here is for the United States to pull out of Afghanistan, to pull out of the Middle East, to stop having U.S. Military personnel killed there on the ground, for a war that has been endless for 19 years. So, with that being the goal, with that being the bottom line, let's see if we can get there and strike a deal that will improve conditions for the people of Afghanistan moving forward.
The U.S. once vowed to liberate Afghan women from the draconian repression of the Taliban, but that planned deal between the United States and insurgents offers no protections for the country's women who fear their hard-won rights could be lost.
Right, and their fears are absolutely sound, because you're looking at a region, a nation, and a group, the Taliban, that has not respected women's rights, that have not given the proper role to women as they have deserved and evolved to have and have gained those rights for themselves. The Afghan women, alongside Iranian women, Saudi women, Iraqi women, Lebanese women, have fought for so many decades to be equals, if not ahead of men in universities, in places, in cultural places, in obviously the familial unit. But you're looking at a patriarchal society, a tribal society, in which women will be downtrodden. They'll continue to be so. So it doesn't look good for women. Obviously, there's a lot of articles written on the fear that women's rights groups will lose the battles that they have been fighting for, the rights that they have been fighting for. And this comes as no surprise when you have a Taliban, a terror organization that will be in charge of a nation. We can't expect better than that. But I think it's wonderful that this this concept, this matter is being given a platform, that you're giving it a platform, Hal, and to talk about the women and what will happen to them. So I think as long as we keep talking about it, that's the best chance we can give to the Afghani women and other women all around the world to have their human rights or their rights in mind.
Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau was in Africa recently, Lisa, pushing for a seat on the UN Security Council. U.S. President Trump is also doing a little bit of traveling, and he's making his way to India. What's taking him there?
Yes. Well, India being a major economy in that part of the world next to China, they're vying to be as important as China is. And because they are a rival, what better timing than to go on a day like now or this week where, the coronavirus has taken, basically taken China out of the game for now. Factories being closed there, coming off of the heels of the Chinese New Year. People have not gone back to work. And India is quite important in pharmaceuticals, in parts and supplies. So they want to play along also. And even though there has been this tit for tat with the president of India, Modi, and President Trump, there's always this very natural relationship between India and the United States. And they are hoping to kind of reinforce this relationship with a treaty, with a handshake, and of course, this amazing march that has shown what incredible fans Donald Trump has in India. One article I was reading talked about how the Indians hope to dazzle Donald Trump, and they hope to close the city off so that he doesn't see the garbage or smell the bad smells or see the poverty, things that they're not proud of, but to show him their best version of India, to give him a tour and to treat them like royalty on this trip.
Angry Iranians are using social media to encourage an election boycott, Lisa. A recent report says voter turnout in Iran is below 50%. That's the first time since the 1979 Islamic Revolution.
Right. So if you look back to 2009, when Iran experienced their Green Revolution, that started with a fraudulent election in which the people ran out onto the streets and said, look, that is not who we voted for. It was President Ahmadinejad who claimed a re-election. That's not who we voted for. And because you're so corrupt, we are protesting not just the fraudulent election, but the entire government of this Islamic Republic that has been in office for 41 years. I think this coming off of that has, we've seen that people that have been in perpetual protest mode on the streets of Iran, and this time around, there was a movement on social media encouraging Iranians not to come out onto the streets, not to vote, and to really throw into doubt and to delegitimize their election. That's exactly what happened. The numbers tell the better story of how Iranians did not come out to vote. This was the lowest voter turnout since they came into power, and they toppled the Shah 41 years ago. And whoever they claim will be the winner is, it's a dictatorship, right? So it's something that the people did not want, they didn't vote for, and the protests will undoubtedly continue there.
Syrian defenses intercepted hostile targets over Damascus, and Israeli jets have struck Islamic Jihad targets in both Syria and Gaza.
Right. The proxy war continues with many layers of different factions in Syria. Of course, this being more of a proxy war between the Iranian regime and Israeli forces than anything else. Iran, of course, being in Syria in order to prop up the Bashar al-Assad regime, in order to spread its version of Shiite Islam throughout the region, in order to have a footstep in Syria. Iran has been there, has provided the boots on the ground there in order to prop up Bashar al-Assad and to kill any opposition groups that stand in his way. Alongside them, it's the Turks who are there to kill the Kurds. You have the Russians there who want to take advantage of the situation and have a foothold in the Middle East. And of course, Israel will not stand by to have this threat in the region. So a lot of missiles being fired throughout the Middle East. These proxy wars continue. And of course, the fight between the good guys and the bad guys continue for as long as the Iranian regime wants to push its influence throughout the region. So you have these smaller and larger wars continuing in Yemen, Lebanon, Iraq, in Gaza, in Syria, and the list goes on.
Bringing things a little closer to home now, Lisa. Hollywood movie mogul Harvey Weinstein found guilty out of 2 out of 5 charges in a sexual assault trial. Tell me more about that.
Yes, so this was a long time coming. The Harvey Weinstein trial, and Harvey Weinstein himself being the sort of the face of the Me Too movement that really brought out a lot of different cases, really highlighted an issue of men taking advantage of their positions in Hollywood and elsewhere in the workplace, taking advantage of women who are vulnerable, who are working under them, who hope to advance. And now this trial, which I have recently found out that he will and is working on appealing, he has been convicted. And I think this serves and will serve as a precedent going forward. I think regardless of whether it's in Hollywood or elsewhere and in other in other industries. Of course, this started not just in Hollywood but in the news industry and at a corporation that I worked at. So I know that this hits close to home when you look at all the different cases and all the different victims. Bringing their cases to light. It takes a lot of courage, and I'm glad that this is getting the platform that it deserves. I think that men are not horrible, and not all men are horrible, but these cases need to be brought to light so that we can continue working as professionals, men and women side by side, without the fear of these types of cases continuing in the future.
Lisa, Democrat Bernie Sanders will not be attending the AIPAC conference, but you will be there. In fact, you're speaking on 2 panels.
I will. This is the AIPAC conference that is taking place in Washington, D.C. next week. AIPAC being, of course, the largest and well, not single, but I should say largest and most prominent pro-Israel lobby group in Washington. They have lobbied for the existence of the state of Israel as in a bipartisan way. Both Democrats and Republicans have attended and spoken there in the past. It draws about 20,000 attendees. So it's quite a significant conference. I will be speaking on 2 panels, one on the women of Iran and one on the future of Lebanon. And Bernie Sanders thinks that this is, quote, a platform for bigotry. Bernie Sanders, being a Jew, well, nominally himself, has spoken out against Israel, against the existence of Israel, against a group like AIPAC, and has spoken out more about the Palestinians, giving them a platform and renewing the financial aid that was cut by the Trump administration against the Palestinians for engaging in terrorism. He hopes to renew that aid. So, again, the markets here in the United States have really reacted to Bernie Sanders being the front runner right now as the Democrat candidate for president, and it's no wonder. I mean, it's many of his if not all, of his stances go against, the status quo of capitalism and having a pro-Israel American stance, which is, has been for as long as Israel has been in existence. They have been our only ally in the Middle East. So to really reverse all of this, it's really taking a step back from our American values. And again, the stock market here showing that uncertainty in his victories thus far. So I hope, I should say, that more Democrats step up. They attend this conference. They speak out against the policies that are quite dangerous. In speaking, in favor of communist Cuba and speaking against a democratic Israel, just shows, some of his very dangerous policies. And again, I think a lot of Americans will find faults as we go further and really get into the weeds of where he stands on many of these issues. We'll find faults with them. And we'll see where we stand as we get closer to the 2020 election.
Reporter and host of the Foreign Desk, Lisa Daftari, joining me once again from Los Angeles. Thanks again, Lisa.
My pleasure.
Leprosy, otherwise known as Hansen's disease, is one of those diseases we recognize from reading in the Bible, but we probably don't know much about the disease. Is it still around? Is it still a problem in many countries around the globe? Joining me now to talk about it is Danny Yohannan. He's the Vice President of Gospel for Asia. Danny, welcome to BCN.
Thank you. It's good to be here today.
What is the Gospel for Asia all about?
Gospel for Asia started as a small prayer meeting actually in my parents' living room about 40 years ago. And from that small prayer meeting, God enabled us to be able to help literally hundreds of thousands of people in kind of lifting them out of their poverty, to be able to help tens of thousands of children to be able to go to school, to have a future, but then also to be able to bring the love of Christ to literally places that have never heard about Christ. Very often, some of our people will go to villages and say, "Excuse me, do you know Jesus Christ?" And the answer oftentimes will come back something like this: "I've lived here my whole life. Your friend Jesus is not here. Maybe check the next village down that road and you'll find your friend Jesus there." And so our heart and passion is to know Christ, but then to also make him known, not just in a word, but also in deed, which is what we do to be able to help lift people up out of their poverty and help them have a future.
Danny, we often don't hear about Hansen's disease or leprosy in North America. Apparently, there are 10 to 20 new cases annually in Canada and up to 250 cases each year in the United States. But in many Asian nations, there are more than 200,000 new cases each and every year.
Yeah, it is quite shocking. It's one of those things that is just out of sight, out of mind. Just because we don't see it, we kind of imagine that it's not happening. It's kind of like modern slavery. There's more slaves today than many times any other time in history. And yet, just because we don't see it right in front of us, or we are not in the place to acknowledge it, it's something that we kind of push away. Leprosy is one of those diseases that we hear it and it causes us to get a little bit scared, but we don't realize, like you said, there are cases here, cases in Canada, but primarily places in South America and Africa and Asia, which you have hundreds of thousands of cases. We typically use the term Hansen's disease here, so people don't hear the term leprosy. But I believe one of the reasons why we don't pay attention to it is because the numbers are so small. Like you said, 20 and 10, it's so small compared to the population that it's almost a non-issue. But when you come to places like Asia or Africa, you're dealing with a shame-oriented culture. And so the reason why it compounds is people don't want to let anyone else know that they have leprosy because it's shameful. And so they kind of hide away until it's too late to actually get any treatment or help. And that's why you see these ginormous numbers of hundreds of thousands of people contracting leprosy. And that is kind of an unfortunate thing to see, where there is help and treatment, but the shame that comes with it is exactly what you see in the Bible, where people were shamed and isolated because they have leprosy.
Can you explain exactly what leprosy or Hansen's disease is, and how do people actually get it?
Leprosy is a infection where it attacks the nervous system, and it affects the nerves. We usually think of what leprosy is like. Leprosy causes your fingers to fall off, or your nose, or you get injured in some way. I believe it was Philip Yancey who co-authored a book called The Gift of Pain. And in there, the doctor was explaining an event that happened in his life where he realized what leprosy actually does. It doesn't just cause your limbs to fall off. He was trying to open a door with a key that seemed to be kind of stuck. And so this little kid who had leprosy came by and said, "Let me try." And so he turned the key until his hand started bleeding, and yet he was able to open the door. And what the doctor realized is leprosy attacks the nerves and destroys the feeling where you end up injuring yourself. And so just imagine if you did not feel a pebble in your shoe and you kept walking and walking, walking, you would tear a hole through your foot. Or if your back was out and you kept walking in the wrong way, you would injure yourself permanently. This is what happens to people who have leprosy. That is destroying their nerves, where they burn themselves and don't feel it. They injure themselves, they don't feel. They cut themselves, and this is why you see limbs missing and fingers missing, because it's continually they're hurting themselves. And so leprosy is a bacteria that can be transmitted usually through an open wound. And funny enough, armadillos, which we have plenty of them here in Texas, actually carry leprosy, but it's
Wow.
quite difficult to catch leprosy. Think about this. Mother Teresa spent majority of her life working among leprosy patients, and she didn't contract leprosy. So as long as there's proper hygiene and care given to open wounds and not, cross-contamination, it is one of those diseases that can be prevented, and you can work among leprosy patients with no difficulty. But the real issue is when it attacks the nervous system, if treatment is not given quick enough, that is when they begin to injure themselves over and over again, and then you get infections, and then it's a compounding effect. And that's why it's such a devastating disease, where you have people hiding away and not wanting to let anyone else know, and then it gets worse and worse and worse.
And we read in the Bible that people with leprosy were treated as outcasts. Danny, is that still the case today?
It is very much the case today. I believe one of the reasons why, and I'm speaking as not an authority on this, even in the West, why do we call it Hansen's disease? We go by the official name because if you were to walk down the hospital corridor and hear that someone had leprosy, everyone down that corridor would get scared, because even today with all the technology and all the knowledge and education, we still cringe at the idea of leprosy because it's it's a death sentence. It used to be a death sentence, especially back in the Bible times and for many years before they found treatment. But in many of the places in Asia, since it is a shame-oriented disease that it combines with a culture of shame, people are isolated by their friends, their family. They lose their jobs. They become outcasts. The only friends that they can have is the other people who have leprosy that they are living with in these leprosy colonies. Gospel for Asia, with our field partners, we minister to hundreds and thousands of these leprosy patients that are put away in these camps. And hopefully there is some family members who care enough to actually bring food to them. But it is one of those devastating things. Not only are they isolated, but very often they will go for many, many years without people actually embracing them, touching them. They have little or almost no human contact in terms of touch because people are so afraid to even touch them.
Does this shunning really cause someone with the symptoms of leprosy or Hansen's disease to keep that secret to themselves and not maybe seek help?
Absolutely. It is one of those things where if you are afraid of losing your job or afraid of bringing shame to your family, you're not going to say anything. I'll give you an example. There was a man who I believe had cancer in his body, and there was no possibility of being healed by any treatment. And so he decided to take a long walk and drink some poison and commit suicide. And we would hear that and say, that's a terrible thing. But for him, it was a situation where his family will be left for caring for someone who they cannot find healing or hope. We're going to spend all the money, and the rest of the community will say it's because of some curse that's come upon him because of something that happened in his family. And so he decided the less shameful thing to do was to commit suicide. While he was on the way to commit suicide, someone gave him a gospel tract, something that tells people about the love of Christ, a little pamphlet. And so he decided, might as well read this before I end my life. And there he read about Christ, the God that loves him. And there he gave his heart to Christ, committing his life to him, and God healed him of that cancer. And today he is sharing the gospel in the same place that he came from. In the same way, many people who have contracted leprosy, it's such a scary and shameful thing that they wait and prolong anyone else knowing about it. And so by that time, oftentimes treatment is basically trying to maintain rather than trying to heal or prevent further contamination.
Danny, in its early stages, antibiotics apparently can cure leprosy. Is that true?
It is. If someone will, catch it early enough, if they go to the doctor early enough, there is treatment to be able to help people who have contracted leprosy. But it goes back to the issue of people waiting till it's too late because it's connected with I don't want anyone else to know, and it's a shameful thing. But this actually has to do with more education and helping people to recognize the possibility of getting cured and healing, and showing them that can actually restore honor back to them rather than living in shame. But it is really a combination of medical help and the education side, and bringing hope and healing, and also helping them to understand how Christ loves them.
Once the disease is actually set in, though, is there any hope of a cure after that, or does the leprosy just continue to get worse?
The leprosy continues to get worse, or it will be slowed down. And a lot of times, you can help as much as you can by keeping wounds clean. If they've lost, fingers or toes, that they have, special shoes that is made especially for them, that kind of doesn't rub against the wounds. And you got to, you have to have a lot of help and care, and taking care of the wounds and being very careful, because like I said before, if you don't have feelings in your limbs, you end up injuring yourself. So you have to be very, very aware. Within our ministry, we have the Sisters of Compassion, which is these wonderful ladies who have committed their life to either help in the slums, or help with children, or help in the leprosy colonies. And so often you see these amazing women going and cleaning the wounds of these beautiful people who have contracted leprosy, and telling them how much they love them, and they do this in the name of Christ. They go and help clean their homes and feed them, and help them with giving their bath and giving them dress. Basically, you have to have someone kind of help take care of you. Otherwise, it's just it's a disease that debilitates the person until they basically cannot help themselves anymore. It's a terrible disease.
We read in the Bible that Jesus healed lepers. Danny, have you seen healings of leprosy in India?
We have actually seen quite a few people that have been healed of leprosy when we were able to pray for them. And so you see there's, different types of healing that takes place. There is a supernatural healing that takes place where you actually see people cured of leprosy or cured of other diseases. It happens all over the place where the gospel is being presented. But you also have the healing of people's hearts. We actually have churches that are in the leprosy colonies, and people without fingers are clapping their hands and raising their hands to Jesus, and they're worshiping and partaking of the Eucharist together. And so brothers and sisters who don't have leprosy worshiping together with those who actually have leprosy. And so it is a complete healing of their hearts, not just their bodies. But we do actually see God answering prayer, and it is so exciting to see God answering prayer to supernaturally heal many of them, but also to see that there is joy and hope and healing in their hearts, and they're smiling on the outside and on the inside of their hearts, even though they may be suffering with the leprosy. But is joy to see that our hope is in Christ.
Danny, what's the response from those who receive help and acceptance from mission workers?
The response is amazing. People's hearts are very open to any encouragement, any medical help, any education help. One of the things that we do every single year is called the Christmas Gift Catalog campaign, where we help people with items that help them break out of the cycle of poverty. And part of that help and healing is to help people in either the slums or leprosy colonies to be able to help not only with education, but items that can actually help their life become better. And it's one of the things that is just so common whenever we help someone with like a water buffalo or a Jesus well, a clean water project, or helping someone clean their wounds. They often ask, why are you doing this? No one touches us. Why are you doing this? You're touching our wounds. You're cleaning our wounds. Why are you doing this? Why are you giving us this water buffalo? And this is what we tell them. It's because we love Christ, and we want you to know that Christ loves you too. and that what he has done for you. And literally their eyes will start to water and they weep and cry. They have not experienced love in that way. Remember, very often they go for such a long time without anyone talking to them, without anyone embracing them. And now someone not only is embracing them, cleaning their wounds, but we care for them tangibly, practically, and we become the hands and feet of Christ to them. And it literally just breaks their heart and melts their heart. It's amazing to see what God is doing.
So how can our viewers specifically help those afflicted by Hansen's disease or leprosy?
I think there's probably 2 or 3 things that people can do, and all of us fit into some of these categories. One is we can all pray. Jesus said, pray to the Lord of the harvest to send more laborers into the field. That is something that all of us can do. I would encourage people to spend 15 minutes a week in prayer. Pray for God to send more laborers, God to do incredible things on the mission field around the world. If we don't know what to pray, use your internet, your radio, your newspaper, if people still have newspapers, and use those as sources of prayer. Because when we see something happen in another place, pray, God, break my heart with the things that break your heart. As Christians, we should be aware of what's happening around the world, and we should be praying and fasting for God to be doing something. Second, I would encourage people to use their social media, not just for bad things and discouraging people, but look, we can let people know, hey, I just learned this new thing about leprosy, and I learned this new thing about Hansen's disease. Get more people to be praying, get more people to be aware of this. I would encourage every church this Sunday to spend 5 minutes during their Sunday service praying for those who have contracted leprosy or those who are working among leprosy patients. Third, I would encourage people to go to gfa.ca and learn more about what Gospel for Asia is doing to combat this disease of leprosy. On our website, we have plenty of stories, videos, things that will encourage your heart and help you to realize that things are going in a way that is making a difference. And so people can go to gfa.ca to learn more and be encouraged.
It's a great way to wrap it up. Danny Yohannan, Vice President of Gospel for Asia, thanks a lot for joining me today from Texas.
Thank you. It's my privilege.
On behalf of all of us here at BCN, I'm Hal Roberts. God bless, and thanks so much for watching.